All right, we'll be back from that commercial break that we return with the Coffee Court discussions tonight. Now, we're looking at the merge of parastatals. Uganda is expected to save up to 649 billion shillings annually from the rationalization, merging and mainstreaming of agencies of 53 government agencies and functions, according to the Ministry of Public Service. Now, tonight on the Coffee Court, Fred Makubia weighs in on the implication of this onto Uganda's economy today. Let's have a look.
Well, good evening and welcome to the Coffee Court. This time around we'll discuss matters of government is moved, definitely to emerge. Parastatals. I'm joined by Professor Ndebesa Mangusha. He's a board chairperson of CIATIN, but is also a senior lecturer at Makerere University. Professor, it's a pleasure and thank you for joining us.
Thank you, and good evening, viewers.
You follow economic matters. Maybe let's begin with what is your take on the current state of the economy?
Oh, the current state of the economy in Uganda. Well, Uganda's economy is in a recession or in a crisis, just like all countries globally have an economic crisis. But ours is more vulnerable to economic shocks from outside because it is not an integrated economy. It has no industrial base, and therefore, in this respect, whenever there is a crisis outside, we catch a cold. So if we look at some figures, you find that we have a trade deficit of more than $400 million. And in terms of GDP, of course, our GDP is still low, and that's why we are still a least developed country. The president's statement, notwithstanding that we have gone to the low middle income, but I think we are still an LDC.
Said you quoted him wrongly. He didn't say that.
He said that what?
He said something different.
Okay, later on, but he said he congratulated Ugandans for going to the middle income status, although later he amended it to say we are going there. But originally he said we have entered there.
Okay.
So we are a least developed country with a big trade deficit, and our economy is agricultural based in respect of employment. Although the biggest sector of our economy is services, which accounts for about 50%, agriculture only accounts for about 22% of the GDP.
Okay.
But largely, the majority of the people, about 75%, are employed in agriculture. And once a country is in agricultural sector, basically, that means it is a low productivity economy.
Okay.
So we are not doing well there in terms of industrialization. If you consider our exports, we don't export most of the high value products outside. We are still exporting either agricultural products, but now we're exporting gold.
Okay. So
by and large, inflation is going up, and that is affecting, of course, our economy. We are highly indebted. Almost indebtedness is coming to 50% of GDP. So we are not doing very well because, anyway, we were already a poor economy, a least developed country economy, and now matters have been made worse by the war between Ukraine and Russia, as well as the COVID pandemic.
Okay. Now that you're saying we're not doing well, finally government is back on the track to emerge parastatals as a mechanism of cutting expenditure. They're looking at government cutting expenditure. Do you think that would be the right move?
Let's give it a broader reflection and look at its history and say that actually the NRM government is responsible for the multiplication of these development of these agencies and authorities, because they were not as many as before. What was many as before were parastatals that were engaged in trade and development, but not in governance. Now, these parastatals, or these agencies of government were a creation of NRM, most of them.
But these are not political, it's not a political move.
You mean the policy shift?
Yes, it's an administrative move.
No, it is political because they were created politically, and the shift is also political because I don't think that it is barely a technical question. It is also a political question. Policies of government are actually political. You cannot say they are purely administration. But anyway, let's talk about the question of governance. This is now the question of technical governance or management of public affairs beyond the political field.
Okay.
Yeah, the merger of the hitherto development agencies of the government, which had been created by way of horizontal decentralization, because there was vertical decentralization, that is decentralization from the center to local governments. Simultaneously, at that time, the 1990s, there was also horizontal decentralization, decentralizing from the ministry, the main ministry, to these agencies. So it was a form of decentralization.
It was also the same.
Horizontal decentralization. Government now has since realized that that policy of horizontal decentralization to agencies was not as efficient and effective as envisaged by those who recommended that policy. And it is now trying to shift back to merge them into the mother ministries.
What is the contributing factor for the inefficiency in your view, Professor?
No, originally the ministries were perceived to be inefficient because the ministries were clogged by bureaucracy. Bureaucracy is normally accused of creating inertia. Now, by horizontal decentralization, it was avoiding the traditional bureaucracy in the mainstream ministries. But two, it was also thought that in order to attract technical people who would not be attracted to the ministries under the traditional public service arrangement, you had to create these parastatals bodies and then remunerate them very well, motivate them to work efficiently because they have been paid differentially better than those who remained in the ministries.
Okay.
And two, this was a donor-imposed policy because the donors could not pay all public servants or civil servants the living wage. They prevailed upon the ministries to create these technical parastatals where there would be few people without being clogged with bureaucracy and pay them, remunerate them well, incentivize them so that they perform efficiently and effectively. So that was a package for this horizontal decentralization from ministries to parastatals.
Okay.
Now they have thought of shifting back after realizing, one, that they are very expensive because it is duplication of duties. You have duties performed by traditional civil servants in ministries which are duplicated in these agencies, and therefore you are paying people a double group. That's one.
And yet one person would perform the same.
Yes, and but two, also it created friction within public service. You find somebody in the agency being paid, remunerated better than the one in the ministry, and yet the one in the ministry is at the same level or even above. Where you find somebody in an authority is paid much more than a permanent secretary who is supposed to be his or her boss.
You have some example for us?
All ministries, I mean, some like UNRWA, the director of UNRWA, I think, earns more than 40 million. And there is no permanent secretary who even earns 20 million. That was a challenge.
Given her JD, she does a lot of work.
But you are now...
As an executive director.
Let's not reduce the debate to UNRWA. All the other authority heads, whether it is the planning authority, whether civil aviation authority, whether Uganda Revenue Authority, whether National Environmental Management Authority, they all earn differential salaries which are much more than those who are supposed to supervise them from their mother ministries. So it's not only UNRWA. Now, you are saying she does much more work. You do more work when you are handling only one sector of transport, when the permanent secretary is supervising all sectors of transport, whether it is air transport, water transport, motor transport, and everything. So you cannot say she does more than a permanent secretary. That is not true.
You find that invalid?
I am saying that they have also realized it. The government has realized that this was not fair, it was not just, and it was making people who remained in their mother ministries not perform as well as they should be performing. If you create NADS and you make the director of NADS earn much more than the commissioner or director in the Ministry of Agriculture, it is unfair. And that is why they have decided to merge them. That is another reason why they have decided to merge them and reduce on the expenditure in terms of reducing the numbers. But also, you found that there was a duplication of roles and confusion, because you find an agency is doing what the ministry is doing, and why do you have two roles performed, one role performed by different state organs? That's why they have decided to shift back to the mother ministries. But also, I think it is because donors have become fatigued and they are no longer funding those parastatals as they used to do before. And that explains partly why there is a shift from this horizontal decentralization back to the mother ministries. However, I want to say that this is a rash move. I have not heard that there was a feasibility study or an evaluation study to find out the pitfalls in horizontal decentralization so that they are plugged in such a manner that you also don't again create a crisis like there was before that horizontal decentralization, because there were reasons why and logic why there was decentralization at that horizontal level. So a feasibility study, evaluation study should have been done thoroughly, and after it has been done, it should be debated publicly so that we find ways and means of policy shift. The challenge is that we are having a policy shift when it has not been properly understood and debated and evaluated.
So apart from the speed under which government is operating, you think as a professor that it is the right move and this will help government?
It has been an outcry out there that there is duplication of work and there is much expenditure, public service expenditure, which can be reduced. As to whether it will work or it will not work, it will also depend on how it will be practiced, but it will also depend on whether there was a thorough evaluation of this shift. You may find that actually, in the case of some authorities, it was necessary to create those specialized agencies so that they concentrate on one work. They are not encumbered by this bureaucracy, and they would attract specialized people. For example, I think when they created things like Revenue Authority, it did better than previously when Customs Union, sorry, not Customs Union, the Department of Customs and the Department of Inland Revenue, whatever, were still in the Ministry of Finance. So there might be areas where the parastatals need to be retained. And I think government has also said some parastatals will be retained. But they must be discussed first, because this is a major policy shift. So why they are not working, hold on, why they are not working precisely is why we also blame government. That horizontal decentralization was embarked upon without thorough debate and involvement of both people in the ministry, the general public, parliament, so that we would see the desirability of that policy shift. Now we are going back again, more or less hurriedly, because the government wants to cut down on costs.
Is this a people's issue or it's a government issue?
Basically, policies are made by government, but they should be made in the interests of the people. According to the constitutional mandate, it is the government that makes policies or reverses policies or shifts policies. However, there are certain guidelines guiding policy making in Uganda. The guidelines are such that the policy shifts or policy making should be participatory. In other words, there is no policy that should be passed without the involvement of the general public. And two, that any policy should have alternatives. There should not be one, when you are making policy, you make a proposal normally from the ministry, and then it is taken. But before it is approved finally by the general cabinet, there should be alternatives. However, in Uganda, alternatives would formally come from opposition. But opposition is not taken seriously and not involved. And secondly, the general public is also not effectively involved. For example,
but you seem to be saying this is a political move. I see it, I perceive it as an economic move. Merging is an economic move. You seem to be perceiving it as a political move, Professor.
It is formally a political, an economic move, but the logic is political. Because they want to reduce on public expenditure, but two, possibly there are certain parastatals that have given, agencies that have given headache to the government. I will give you an example. Uganda Human Rights Commission. Uganda Human Rights Commission has awarded costs to those whose rights have been violated by security agencies, huge amounts, maybe they are going to trillions, and the government is indebted to them. When we are talking about the debt of government, we don't normally also factor that one into the whole issue.
Okay.
They are there. So they might look at, for example, the Human Rights Commission as giving them hard time. And that...
But that's their mandate, that's what it's supposed to do.
I beg your pardon?
That is what they are supposed to do.
Yeah, like
as a commission.
If opposition, even generally, is supposed to oppose or to give alternative views to government, and you marginalize it, that is our governance regime in Uganda, where there is no tolerance of opposing and alternative viewpoints. Some of the parastatals may have carried out certain functions that government was not comfortable with, and therefore to bring them and streamline them within the ministries for immediate supervision by the political heads might be working for government to avoid opposition within.
Are there those that you think have really done their best?
There are parastatals which have been said to have performed best. Among them is the National Water and Sewerage Corporation. It is said to have performed very well, and maybe it is going to be retained. They say Revenue Authority has done very well, but I doubt it in my opinion.
Why?
It has done better than it used to do. It has collected more revenue than the ministry used to collect. However, Uganda Revenue Authority, which has been praised by some people, is because they have done it in ignorance. Uganda Revenue Authority is the worst revenue performer in the whole of East Africa. Kenya collects about 20% of its GDP ratio. Tanzania collects about 18%. Rwanda collects about 15%. Uganda collects about 12 to 13%. And even President Museveni has felt it and has commented on it, why Uganda Revenue Authority performs worst in terms of GDP ratio. So anyway, some parastatals, I think, have done their best, like NMS, this is National Medical Stores. They have purchased some drugs, I think, and tried to distribute them, and they need to be retained so that they continue improving on what they are doing, but there are others which actually need to be merged.
Okay. You know, matters of salary, matters of merging, we can't discuss it in a day, Professor. What's your final appeal as we wind up this discussion?
My take on the whole thing of this merger and the decentralization, horizontal decentralization, whatever the case may be, definitely policies are not supposed to remain there permanently. You can always shift policies. But the shifting of policies should have, in this case, administrative logic, efficiency and effectiveness and justice. See, that is where policymakers also go wrong. To think that policies are only for efficiency and effectiveness, which is a capitalist mindset. You can have a parastatal, an agency existing, may not be efficient and effective in terms of effective performance, but might be taking services to the marginalized people. And therefore it can be retained even when it is making losses and taking a lot of money from government, because its performance is to create equity and equality and social justice in society. Okay. So I am advising the government that when they are carrying out policies, whether the horizontal decentralization or vertical decentralization or whatever case may be, they should look at efficiency, yes, effectiveness, yes, cost sharing, yes, but they should also look at social justice delivery so that we build a nation. Another one should be nation building, which is related to social justice.
Okay.
If we have policies that are not building social justice in the country, we are still an emerging country. We are not yet a nation state in the typical sense of the word. We are merely geographic expression. Therefore, some political policies, economic policies, and administrative policies should be done in such a way that we build a nation. Okay. And therefore, among other things, and among other factors that can lead to nation unity and cohesion, is building justice mechanisms within our policy makeup, so that we mainstream issues of redistribution of resources, redistribution of opportunities, and taking services away from Kampala, and mainly to other regions that have been identified by Uganda National Bureau of Statistics as the poorest regions in the country. And therefore, those should inform policies rather than efficiency and effectiveness, which is purely capitalism, and it is coming from the Western world, where even in the Western world, they also have policies informed by justice and equity.
Professor Ndebesa, thank you for speaking to us, especially on matters regarding merging of parastatals.
All right, many thanks for being part of Business Today tonight, and we shall surely do it same time tomorrow. I'm Jerome Paul Sonko with Winnie Buyinza Nakauchi on Sign Language. We've been coming to you live from Plot 42, Nile Avenue. Have a blessed night. Good evening.